Hello everyone, my name is Interact and welcome to a beginner's guide to Dead by Daylight. This guide will aim to help you out if you're new to the game to better understand the basics of Dead by Daylight. As I do with all of my videos covering topics in Dead by Daylight, I'll have timestamps up on the screen to help you skip around to certain sections that may be of interest to you, or if you need to come back to this video after a while because given the current state of the script, it may be quite a lengthy video. Let's start off with the extreme basics of what exactly Dead by Daylight is. Dead by Daylight is an asymmetrical multiplayer game, which means that there are two distinct sides. In Dead by Daylight, there are just two sides, known as the survivors and the killer. In any given match of Dead by Daylight, there will only be 4 survivors and 1 killer. This means that survivors have the numbers advantage and need to work together as a team to survive and escape, while the killer is a lone player that is, well, trying to kill the survivors, as the name might imply. There are fairly substantial differences between the survivors and the killer, the main two being that survivors have a third-person camera, while the killer has a first-person camera, and that the survivors are unable to fight back, they can only run and hide, while the killer is able to attack, injure, and, of course, kill the survivors. You'll want to choose which side sounds more interesting to you, although by no means are you only allowed to play a single side. In fact, playing both sides will actually help you to more completely understand the other side, and to quote Sun Tzu, "If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained you will also suffer a defeat." Now let's actually jump into the game and talk more concretely about Dead by Daylight. When you first load up the game, you should see a Help and Tutorials tab on the main screen. Going through the tutorials will not only explain the very basics of Dead by Daylight, but will also get you some easy blood points for completing them. Blood points are the basic currency in Dead by Daylight, which you'll use to level up your varying characters and obtain items, add-ons, and perks, all of which I'll cover in just a little bit. These tutorials will go through the very basics of mechanics and gameplay and give you an idea of the basic controls as well. The Survivor tutorial will teach you the basics of what survivors will be doing in a match, mainly repairing generators, helping out teammates, and avoiding the killer. The Killer tutorial will teach you the basics of what the killer will be doing in a match, mainly attacking the survivors and putting them on hooks to sacrifice them to the entity. Before we hop into an actual match of Dead by Daylight, let's talk a bit more about those blood points, characters, items, add-ons, and perks I brought up earlier, as well as talk about the various menu options. Once you've clicked on either Play as Survivor or Play as Killer, you'll be brought to the Loadout screen. If you click the top leftmost button, the little grid icon, labeled as either Survivors or Killers, depending on which side you're playing as, you'll be shown a list of all the characters that you can play. It is worth noting at this point that all survivors have the same basic stats, that is to say that they are only functionally different in their appearances. All survivors run at the same speed, they all work on generators at the same speed, they all have the same amount of health as each other, etc. Killers, on the other hand, have a lot of unique stats, the main one being their special ability or power. Once you've selected which character you want to play as, if you select the button just below the topmost one, labeled as Loadout, you'll be brought to your actual loadout for that specific character. Here you'll notice a lot of things, but don't worry, I'll cover all of them in detail. Let's start off with a Survivor's loadout screen. In the top of your loadout screen, you'll see a slot for an item, and then 2 slots for add-ons right next to that. Items are special things that you can bring with you into a match to give yourself an advantage. Add-ons can be applied to specific items to enhance the item in various ways, such as increasing how long you can use the item, how efficient it is, and a few other unique effects depending on the item and the add-on. If you die in a match, you'll lose whatever item you brought with you, as well as all the add-ons equipped onto that item. If you manage to escape a match as a survivor, you'll get to keep the item and add-ons that you have in your hands when you escape. You can find items stashed in chests around the map during a match, and these are randomized, so if you want a specific item, it's probably best to bring one in with you. Items will typically only enhance your normal gameplay, meaning that you shouldn't feel required to bring them in if you either don't have any, don't want to bring one in, or are just feeling lucky and want to see what you pull out of a chest. Switching quickly over to the killer side, you'll see that instead of a slot for an item, it will show you the killer's unique power, as well as 2 add-on slots. If you mouse over the faded icon for any killer's power, it will give you a brief rundown of what exactly that power does. Some are a bit briefer than others. Once you click on the add-on slots, you'll be brought to your inventory of add-ons unique to the killer that you have currently selected. These add-ons are unlocked via the Bloodweb that we'll discuss in just a minute. Unlike Survivor's add-ons, any add-ons that you bring into a match as a killer will be used up after that match. As a quick self-plug, I have a series on my channel entitled Entity Education where I go through every single killer's power and add-ons in detail, as well as cover basic perk builds and strategies for each killer, so feel free to check those out if you want to learn more about a specific killer's power, add-ons, or just want some general knowledge for how to play them. To the right of your item and add-on section for both killers and survivors, you'll see a spot for an offering. Offerings can do a number of different things, such as making your next match go to a specific map, increasing or decreasing the amount of fog in the match, and maybe most importantly, increasing how many blood points you gain in a match. Offerings are a one-time use only thing, so once you use one, it's gone forever until you unlock another one in your Bloodweb. And finally, below both item and offering slots, you'll notice 4 perk slots. This is the real meat and potatoes of non-cosmetic customization in the game, and where a lot of your personal choice and playstyle will come into play. You'll start off with only 1 perk slot unlocked on a fresh character, and unlock the rest of them as you level up that character. Every character, survivor or killer, has 3 perks that are unique to them. You will find these listed under the Character Info tab, in addition to some lore about that character. There are also a decent amount of basic perks for survivors and killers that you start off with that will show up in your Bloodwebs without having to do anything to unlock them. Each character will also start off with their own 3 unique perks unlocked at rank 1, so you will start off with at least something to run on each character. Every perk in the game has 3 ranks, and will typically get more powerful as you get a higher rank of them unlocked. You may now be wondering how to unlock perks, and how to get better ranks of perks, and that will bring me to the next tab on the loadout screen, the Bloodweb. The Bloodweb is where you'll be spending all of those blood points that I talked about earlier, and leveling up your characters. Blood points are gained throughout the course of gameplay, basically meaning that as long as you're just playing matches of Dead by Daylight, you'll be getting at least some amount of blood points to spend as you see fit in whatever Bloodwebs you want. Each character does have their own unique Bloodweb, meaning that points that you put into a Dwight won't carry over to a Meg. Another thing to note is that blood points are applied directly to your account, not only to your survivors or your killers, meaning that you can play a match as a killer and spend the blood points gained in that match to level up a survivor or a completely different killer if you choose to do so. Bloodwebs are randomly generated, but they do have a few rules that they follow. The first rule is that you'll always have a perk available to unlock within at least 3 spaces from the center of the Bloodweb. This means that you'll always be able to get at least 1 perk unlocked from each Bloodweb. Another rule is that before level 10, you'll be able to gather everything on the Bloodweb. Past level 10, however, your Bloodweb will start to expand and begin to sometimes offer you 2 perks to choose from. However, once you've selected a perk or gotten a certain amount of items, the entity will begin eating away at the Bloodweb. And if there are 2 perks to choose from, it will start with the second perk selection. You'll always want to go for a perk as quickly as you can on your Bloodwebs once you get the choice between 2 perks, since taking a perk will start the entity eating away at your Bloodweb, making it faster for you to get to the next Bloodweb to unlock another perk or another rank, and saving you blood points in the process. Now at this point you may be wondering about how I said survivors don't have any unique stats, but then I talked about how they have 3 unique perks each. Isn't this a contradiction? Well, one of the other rules of the Bloodweb is that once you reach levels 30, 35, and 40 on any given character, a special version of that character's unique perk will show up on the Bloodweb. This applies to both survivors and killers. Each character has 3 unique perks they will eventually teach to your other characters through progression in their own Bloodwebs. These are known as teachable perks and will show up as an orange version of the perk on the Bloodweb, and once you've unlocked it, it will start to show up on all of your other characters' Bloodwebs. The order of which teachable perks you will unlock for each character is not randomized. They go in the order that they are listed under the Character Information tab. The first one will be unlocked at level 30, the second one will be unlocked at level 35, and the final one will be unlocked at level 40. I'll quickly go over some of the characters and their perks that I think will help you out the most as a newer player for both the survivor side and the killer side, as well as discussing what base killer perks and base survivor perks you may want to consider using while you're trying to unlock teachable perks that you want to use. I'll also give suggestions for people who don't want to spend extra money to unlock DLC characters and want to start with only the base characters provided. Starting off with the survivor side, if you are willing to spend some extra money to unlock the Spark of Madness DLC, I believe that Feng Min is probably the best survivor for newer players to start off with. All three of her perks, Technician, Lithe, and Alert, are solid choices for a new player. Technician will make it so that the noise that you make while repairing a generator will be reduced, as well as making it so that if you fail a skill check, there is a chance that the explosion from failure won't happen. This is great for making you able to work on generators without making as much noise, especially when you're newer to the game. Her next perk, Lithe, is what is known as an exhaustion perk. These are extremely strong perks that have the drawback of giving you a debuff called exhaustion. We have really original naming conventions, I know. Lithe will make it so that whenever you perform a rushed vault, meaning you are holding down your sprint key and you vault over either a pallet or a window, you will gain a burst of speed and move at 150% of your normal movement speed for 3 seconds. This will cause exhaustion for a while and make it so you are unable to use the perk again until your exhaustion has fully worn off. This is great for gaining distance from a killer in a chase, which we will cover a lot more in depth later on in the video. Feng Min's final perk is Alert. Alert will show you the aura of the killer for a few seconds anytime they break a pallet or kick a generator. Killers will be doing both of these actions fairly regularly throughout a match, so essentially Alert will just show you where the killer is periodically. This information can be invaluable, since you'll know what directions might not be safe to go in, or maybe that they're closing in on where you are and perhaps you should be running to a safer location. If you don't want to spend money unlocking the DLC for Feng Min, then I would probably recommend starting out with Claudette. While Claudette doesn't have a powerful exhaustion perk, she does have some very strong information and healing perks. Her first perk is Empathy. Empathy will show you the aura of any of your teammates who are injured within a certain range of you, and at max rank this will cover the entire map. This is not only extremely valuable for being able to see where your teammates are when they get hit, which means you essentially know that the killer is right behind them, but you'll also be able to notice if they're running away from the killer, or it will help you know where someone is hurt and they aren't being chased by the killer, so maybe you can go and help them out by healing them. Her next perk, Botany Knowledge, will assist you greatly in healing up your teammates or even yourself. It will both increase the efficiency of your medkit usage as well as your healing speed. The medkit efficiency will make it so that any medkit you bring in with you while using this perk will last longer, meaning you can just use them more often, and the healing speed will obviously make you able to heal your friends faster and get them back into the action. Her final perk is probably one of the best single perks for a newer player, especially if you're playing by yourself, aptly named Self-Care. Self-Care will make it so that you're able to heal yourself, meaning you won't need a medkit or a friend to get yourself healed up from being injured. The drawback of this, of course, is that it will take you twice as long as if you were to find a friend or use a medkit. Self-Care can be combined with Botany Knowledge to lessen the penalty and make sure that you are able to stay healthy throughout the match and not waste as much time. Once again, do keep in mind that it is faster to get healed by a teammate, and any time that you spend healing yourself is time that you aren't spending working towards powering the exit gates, but you can't exactly work towards powering the exit gates if you're dead. As far as base survivor perks that you may want to consider running, there are 3 that kind of come to mind. The first one is Spine Chill. Spine Chill will light up whenever the killer is within 36 meters of you and looking in your direction. This will give you a warning that the killer may be coming towards you, and you should probably start heading to somewhere safe or just trying to hide. Another good base survivor perk to use would be Will Make It. Will Make It will make you able to heal your friends 100% faster after you rescue them from a hook. This can be great at saving your friends from hooks and then getting them healed up ASAP, so you can get back to your collective goal of repairing generators and escaping the killer. And the final base survivor perk to consider would be Lightweight. Lightweight is good for newer players, and it will help decrease how long your scratch marks last for, making it a bit harder for the killer to track you over long distances while you're running around the map. Now let's talk about what perks you may want to unlock if you're planning on playing Killer. It's a lot harder to recommend what Killer you should start off playing as, since they all have different powers, so instead I'll focus on what are important perks to try and unlock the Teachables for. Let's start off with probably one of the most important perks for Killers, Barbecue and Chili. This perk is unlocked by leveling up Leatherface, who is sadly locked behind buying the Leatherface DLC. Barbecue and Chili will make it so that whenever you hook a unique survivor, meaning you can only ever get a maximum of 4 stacks, you will gain 25% extra blood points at the very end of the match. It also has the in-game effect of showing you the aura of survivors who are far away from a survivor when you hook them, which lets you keep the pressure on by showing you where you should be going after you've already downed and hooked another survivor. The extra blood points are probably one of the best parts of this perk, especially for a new player, since extra blood points means you can level up other characters and get more perks, but the in-game aura is extremely solid at keeping your pressure up by just keeping you in the action. Another extremely strong perk for Killers is Hex Ruin. Hex Ruin is also sadly locked behind a DLC, the Of Flesh and Mud DLC, required to unlock the Hag. Hex Ruin is probably one of, if not the best perk for Killers to slow down survivors on completing generators. Do know that any perk with Hex in the name runs the risk of being removed mid-game by survivors if they cleanse your Hex totem, making them kind of a high-risk, high-reward style of perk. If you don't want to spend any extra money on the game just yet by buying DLC to unlock perks, then I would advise that you put points into Hillbilly for his perk Enduring. Enduring will reduce the stun that you get from being hit with a pallet by up to 50%. This can be invaluable in making pallet stuns not as punishing as they normally can be. I'll cover more about what all of this means later on once we actually hop into a match, but just keep it in mind for now. Pallets are a large part of the actual gameplay of Dead by Daylight, and Enduring is one of the best perks for almost every killer in the game for that reason. Another killer that you might want to put your points into for their Teachables if you don't want to spend money on DLC is the Trapper. He has 2 strong perks for saving you time, Brutal Strength and Agitation. Brutal Strength will increase the speed at which you break pallets and generators. His other perk, Agitation, will increase your movement speed while you are carrying a downed survivor to a hook. Both of these perks will shave off a few seconds here and there and keep you in the action, which is very important for killers. As far as base killer perks go, there are a few that I would recommend newer players to consider using. The first of these would be Sloppy Butcher. Sloppy Butcher will make it so that when you hit a survivor with an attack, they will become affected by hemorrhage and mangled, making them leave more pools of blood behind them and slowing down their healing speed. In addition to obviously wasting their time by making them harder to heal, it will also make them easier to track, and both of these are just extremely invaluable during a match. Another good perk for newer killers might be Unrelenting. Unrelenting will make it so that if you are missing your hits on survivors, the cooldown period after a missed hit will be lessened. This will make it so that you aren't punished as hard for missing your attacks, which can happen especially when you're new to the game. And the final base killer perk that you might want to get, it does kind of require a bit more attention than the others that I've listed. Whispers is one of the best tracking perks in the game for killers, especially at rank 3, and many high-level killer players such as myself run it because of just how much intel you can get out of it. It will light up whenever a survivor is within the listed range of you, which means you'll know what areas of the map have survivors in them and that you should be searching around in them, and what areas of the map you can just skip over because it isn't lit up. This can take some getting used to, and Whispers isn't a perk that everyone universally enjoys, so only use it if you feel like you'll be able to get the maximum value out of it, or you want to. Now back to talking a little bit more about the UI. If you look at the top right of your loadout screen, you'll see all of your currency amounts. The first of these are Oryx cells, and Oryx cells are a currency that you can purchase with real money to buy cosmetics or characters from the in-game shop. The next one is Iridescent Shards, which can be used to purchase some cosmetics and non-licensed characters from the in-game shop, as well as being able to purchase teachable perks from the Shrine of Secrets. Iridescent Shards are obtained through just leveling up your player level, which is the icon right here. Leveling up your player level is just passively done by playing matches of Dead by Daylight, and you'll gain some iridescent shards each time your player level goes up. The player level goes from 1 to 100, and will then, prestige, and reset back down to 1, and you will gain what is known as a devotion level. Currently, devotion means nothing, and there aren't any rewards for going up a devotion level, other than a sense of pride and accomplishment. In between your iridescent shards and your player level will be the current amount of blood points that you have available to spend. And finally, on the far right is your current rank. You have two separate ranks, one for survivor and one for killer. You will start off at rank 20, and the highest rank available in the game is rank 1. You may potentially hear things about how rank is a measure of skill or prowess in the game, but honestly it's mostly just a measure of how much you play the game. Don't worry in the slightest about ranking up. Rank is a fairly abstract and meaningless stat in Dead by Daylight. As you play more, and you begin to understand the game more, your rank will probably just start to naturally increase. Your rank only really matters for the range of players that you'll be getting matched with, meaning that, in theory at least, you should be getting matched with players of roughly equivalent skill levels and experience in Dead by Daylight. Ranks do have a soft reset every 13th of the month, and will reset you down based on what your highest obtained rank was during that reset period. Now let's quickly take a look at the bottom left of the screen, where you'll find two small icons, a gear and a candle. The gear is quite obviously the settings menu, where you can change your graphics qualities, sensitivities, volumes, look at your controls, and even remap controls if you choose to. The candle icon is where you can see your daily rituals. Daily rituals are little challenges that you get every day that will get you some extra blood points. These will either have you play a specific character and do a certain action either specific to that character or just generalized ones, such as healing a teammate 3 times or just repairing a certain amount of generators. Unless it specifically states that a certain character has to be the one completing the daily, they can be completed on any character. So just pick your favorite one and make sure you check in every time you play and see what new daily rituals you have, and maybe you'll play a different character. You can store up to 3 of these at any given time, and can press the trash can icon to reroll one of them every day in case you really don't like playing the character that it wants you to do, or you just feel like randoming another daily ritual. And the very final part of the loadout screen is the briefcase with the creepy spider arm things coming out of it in the bottom left. This is the in-game store, where you can purchase cosmetics or characters for auric cells or iridescent shards, and also purchase auric cells. One of the most useful parts of the store for newer players is the Shrine of Secrets. You can find this in the store under the aptly named Shrine of Secrets tab. This resets every week and is an easy way to unlock teachable perks for iridescent shards, so you don't have to put a ton of blood points into a character to get a teachable that you may want from them. The shrine is randomized every single week, but it will always have 2 survivor perks and 2 killer perks. Alright, so now that we've covered all of the out-of-game things, let's actually hop into a match of Dead by Daylight and talk about what you may be doing throughout the course of a typical match of Dead by Daylight. I'll start off by talking about the UI and all of its features, then go through a quick survivor game example, and then a quick killer game example. Let's first talk about those UI elements, and the ones that will be present for both survivors and killers. In the bottom left of the screen, there will be a few things. Firstly, and maybe most importantly, will be the amount of generators that need to be finished for the exit gates to be powered. This will update as the match goes on, and more generators are fully repaired. Once all of the generators are fully repaired, it will change to a Find the Exit text box, meaning that survivors need to find the exit gates and power them to escape. Next to this will be whatever item you may be holding as a survivor, or the icon of your power as a killer. Depending on the killer, it may have a number of different things on it, including charges or an outline of white or red. This really depends on the killer and can have different meanings depending on the killer's unique power. Next to either the item icon or the power icon, it will show you whatever add-ons you have equipped to either that item or to your killer. Below all of this, there will be the status icons for the 4 survivors in the match. They can either be in the healthy state, the injured state, the dying state, hooked, or just plain dead. You may also see that one of the status icons will have weird spider claw things around it. That just means that that person is the current obsession, and that will vary based on different perks that are either equipped by the killer or the survivor. In the bottom center of your screen is where button prompts will appear. Basically anything that you can do will show up there with the associated button next to it. It will also have a progress bar for when you're doing channeled actions, such as working on generators, healing, opening chests, cleansing totems, etc. Occasionally, while you are working on a generator or healing, you will hear a ping sound, and then a skill check will appear in the very center of your screen shortly thereafter. You'll want to press the button prompt on the screen whenever the clock hand, for lack of a better term, is within the highlighted area. If you miss it, you will fail the skill check. Failing a skill check will give the killer a notification, as well as reset a bit of the progress on whatever it was that you were doing. If you manage to hit the very small highlighted white area, it will count as a great skill check, which is the opposite, I guess, of a failed skill check, in that it will increase your progress slightly. I would recommend that as a new player, unless you feel extremely comfortable with your reflexes, you should typically aim for just the basic skill check area first and only go for great skill checks as a bonus. Occasionally during a match as a survivor, you will see a red icon pop up on the right side of your screen. This means that you are currently affected by a debuff, and they all mean very different things. I'll go over most of them quickly so you have a general idea of what exactly they mean. The first debuff is blindness. The icon looks like this, it's pretty much just an eye. This will disable your ability to see the aura of teammates on hooks or in the dying state. This will deny you some information on being able to help out your friends, and isn't really something that you'll see all that frequently. The next one is the broken status effect. The icon looks like this, simply a cross that has been crossed out. English can be confusing sometimes, I apologize to all non-native speakers. This simply means that you are unable to be healed through normal methods. You won't typically see this icon very frequently either, and if you do, it means you've probably equipped a perk that gives it to you, so be careful to read what perks you do equip. And the next status effect is the Deep Wounds status effect. The icon looks like this, a man's upper torso with a slash through it. This simply means that you have a deep wound that needs to be specially mended through the mending action. Basically, this is just a fatal wound that won't actually put you into the dying state until the orange bar under your status icon runs out entirely. You can mend yourself or have a teammate mend you, and your timer won't decrease while you are within the killer's terror radius. So if you gain this, you have some time before you actually fall over and go into the dying state. Your screen will also kind of go monochrome-y, so it's kind of hard to not notice that you have a deep wound. There's another effect that is somewhat tied to the Deep Wound status effect called Endurance. It has the same icon as Deep Wounds, but it doesn't have the slash down the chest. This just means that if you take a hit while Endurance is still up, you'll go into the Deep Wound status state instead of just going into the dying state immediately. Next up, we have one that you may see probably a lot more commonly as you start to play Dead by Daylight more frequently, the Cursed icon. The icon is a weird 3D-ish triangle, and simply means that the killer has a hex perk that you are currently under the effects of. If you go and find the hex totem, which looks like this, just a plain totem but candles are lit, and you cleanse it, the perk will cease to function. All of these hex perks have different effects depending on what the hex perk that the killer has equipped is. Following that, we have another extremely common one that you will see as you get more playtime in Dead by Daylight as a survivor, and one that will be tied to specific perks, the exhaustion status effect that we talked about earlier. The icon for it looks like this, just an empty heart. It simply means that your survivor is too exhausted to use any of their exhaustion perks until the icon fully disappears. Do note that you will not recover from exhaustion while running. You need to be either standing still, walking, crouched, or crouch walking for it to actually decrease its duration. Then we have probably the scariest one to see as a survivor, the exposed status effect. The icon looks like this, just a skull, and it means that if you are hit by the killer, you will be instantly put into the dying state no matter how healthy you are or how much milk you drink. Your screen will have a black tunnel vision flicker effect thing, I don't really know what to call it, anytime you become affected by the exposed status effect, so you'll know that you're in danger. When you see this icon, you'll want to avoid the killer at all costs. And the final status effect to talk about that you will be seeing somewhat frequently is the mangled status effect. The icon for this one looks like this, simply a broken bone. and it will make it so that you will heal 20% slower. You'll know that someone that you're healing has this because your channel bar will turn red, meaning that you're being slowed down. And the final and potentially most important part of the UI is the bottom right of your screen, where you will have the icons of all of your equipped perks. These will help you keep track of different things depending on what exactly the perks are that you've brought into the match. If it's a perk that has stacks, your stack amount will be shown on the icon. If it's a perk that lights up under certain conditions like Spine Chill, it will either be darkened or lit up, etc. This all depends, as I said, on what perks you bring in with you, but just keep in mind that if you aren't sure if one of your perks is maybe active, or on cooldown, or how many stacks you have, just check the bottom right of your screen and look at it. Now we're almost at the part where we're going to hop into an example match of Dead by Daylight, but quickly, let's talk about a few rules that the game follows when generating the maps for each match. Each map will, with few exceptions, have 2 constant buildings, and then the rest of the map will be somewhat randomly generated. The actual boundaries and size of the map will always be constant, but everything spawned inside of the confines will be somewhat randomly generated. The 2 main buildings that will always spawn, once again with very few exceptions, are going to be whatever the map is named after, and then the Killer Shack. One of these 2 locations will spawn with a basement in it, and the basement will always have a chest, 4 hooks in the middle, and lockers. 2 other chests will be spawned around the map, as well as 5 totems and 7 generators. Chests, totems, and generators are all semi-randomly spawned around the map, meaning that they pick from a pool of locations and then are placed onto the map. This means that while they are technically randomly placed, after a long enough period of time, you'll start to get a feel for where exactly you may expect things to be showing up on the map, once you're a little bit more familiar with it. Now, those with a keen ear may have noticed that I said 7 generators will spawn, and that you only need 5 generators to power the exit gates. You would be correct. You do only need 5 generators to power up the exit gates, not all 7. This is done, I assume, so that you don't end up with a killer just puppy dog guarding the final generator and the game just grinding to a halt, like that one kid did when you used to play hide and seek when you were younger. You know who I'm talking about. Alright, so once you've finally selected which side you want to play, you have a loadout that you want to use, press that Find a Match button. After everyone is readied or the timer runs out, you will be taken to a screen that will show what offerings everyone brought in. This will be skipped if nobody brought any offerings at all, and then you will be brought to a loading screen that will have some handy tips in the bottom. Once the loading is finished, you actually get to start the game properly. Now let's talk about what's going to happen when you finish loading into a match. We'll start off with the survivor side of things, and touch briefly on your main objectives and give kind of an example game of what you might be doing most of the time while you're playing Dead by Daylight. When you spawn in, you may spawn in with a teammate or 2, or you may just spawn separated. Typically, you'll spawn within sight of a generator, and you might even see a chest nearby, or a totem if you do a little bit of exploring. You'll want to keep your eyes out for the killer, since you may be able to see them across the map before you actually enter into their terror radius and start to hear the heartbeat. Keeping an eye on your environment is a very important part of Dead by Daylight. You'll want to stay vigilant at all times, especially since some killers have stealth abilities that will remove their terror radius, meaning you can only trust your eyes. If you see the cursed icon appear on your screen when you start working on a generator, you'll know that the killer has a hex perk, so keep your eyes out for any lit totems to cleanse them of their hex perk. Alright, so let's say in our example match, everything's gone smoothly so far, and you finish the generator that you spawned next to. Well, by finishing the generator, you've just alerted everyone on the map with a loud noise and some bright lights. This may attract the killer, so you may want to start running away and either hide or try to find another generator to start working on, so you can get towards that goal of escaping. Generators can typically be spotted very easily due to their extremely tall lights. If the lights are on, that means the generator has already been completed and you should move on to try and find another one. If the lights are flickering and kind of sparking, that means the generator has not been completed yet. Keep in mind that while you're running instead of walking, you'll be leaving behind you what are called scratch marks, which last for about 10 seconds and will slowly fade away during their duration. Sometimes you may want to walk instead of just rushing and running everywhere, since it may give your position away to the killer. You may also notice that there are a lot of crows perched on top of things all over the map. These are actually there to help out the entity and the killer, and will call out and fly up if you move too quickly near them. Just be aware of them and try not to startle them if you're attempting to be Solid Snake. Let's say, in our example game, that the killer does actually happen to spot you while you're running away from the generator that you just finished. You lock eyes and you see him running towards you. Don't panic. I mean, kind of panic a little bit, but maybe not too much. The killer does move faster than you, but don't worry. You have a few things you can use that the killer isn't really so good with. The first and most helpful of these things is going to be the wooden pallets that are scattered around the map. There will typically be roughly about 14 of these scattered around the map for you to use. Most of these will be randomly spawned, but there are a few guaranteed spawns at or near the two main buildings that we talked about earlier. So if you're unsure of where to go, try and go for one of those two main buildings. You will want to save these pallets as much as you can, since you do only get a limited amount of them. What you should do is run towards them, and then try and loop around where the pallet is until the killer is just about to catch you, and then drop the pallet on their head and hopefully stun them. Sometimes you don't have time to actually loop around a pallet, and you have to drop it early. That's okay. As I said, don't panic too much. You may notice that some of the pallets have nearby windows. You can use these windows a lot faster than the killer can because you're small and more nimble, or you can just pretend that your character practiced parkour in their spare time or something if you want to believe that. What you'll want to try and do is use the window to extend the time you can spend keeping the killer from hitting you before you're forced to drop the pallet. You can't just keep using windows forever, however. After you've used a window 3 times in a single chase, the entity will get bored and block you off from using it again for a period of time. You may find that some loops have larger walls that you can't see over, so you might think that you'd have trouble keeping track of where the killer actually is during your chase. Thankfully, all killers give off what is known as a red stain in a small cone in front of them, so you can typically see under the wall to know exactly where they are and where they're facing if they aren't actively trying to hide their red stain. This entire process of running the killer around pallets and windows is called looping, and is a great way that you can buy time for your teammates to hopefully finish generator repairs and get those exit gates up and running while you have the killer distracted. Once you have dropped a pallet, the killer may choose to start kicking it and breaking it, in which case you should use this time to run away and either try and hide or find another safe spot to loop with a pallet and maybe a window. If they do choose not to break the pallet, you can use it like a temporary window and slide over it. Killers are unable to slide over pallets, so you'll probably see them breaking them more often than not because they're basically temporary windows. Looping is one of the most important things to learn as a Survivor player, and really the only way to get better at it is just by doing it enough times to get a feel for it, when you should drop the pallet, when you'll get away with not dropping the pallet. Just remember what I said about trying to save your pallets for as long as you can before the killer is actually able to hit you, and you'll probably do just fine. So back to our example match, let's say things didn't quite go as planned and the killer has hit you. Most of the time, you'll just end up injured. This means that you will get a large boost of speed, which you can use to get farther away from the killer. And in addition, the killer will slow down to wipe off their weapon. Just because they kill people doesn't mean they have an excuse not to clean up after themselves. Because you are injured, you'll start leaving that trail of blood behind you, as well as grunting out in pain, because being hit with some of the weapons that the killers have in the game would probably hurt like really bad. After you've been hit, your speed boost might be enough for you to get away and hide from the killer and lose them. If that does work, great. Either find a friend to heal you up, or maybe a chest that you can get a medkit from, or just a generator to keep repairing towards that end goal of powering up your escape route. Let's say that things didn't quite go as planned again, and the killer finds you before you're finished healing, and they hit you once more. You'll now enter what is known as the dying state. You'll start slowly bleeding out on the ground, and you'll be able to either start crawling very slowly, or begin recovering some of your strength. You won't be able to fully recover your strength and pick yourself up. You're going to need a friend to help you out with that. But you can get yourself all the way back up to 95%, meaning that a friend can come by and heal you for just a brief second, and you'll be back up and running around in the injured state. More than likely, the killer will pick you up, throw you over their shoulder like it's your wedding day, and then take you to a hook and throw you up on that, hopefully unlike your wedding day. At this point, you'll see a prompt to wiggle free while they are carrying you to that hook. You just need to alternate between the button prompts on your screen, and the wiggle bar will slowly fill up. You do not need to mash this as fast as humanly possible. It does not increase based on how quickly you do it. Wiggling will make the killer sway back and forth, kind of like they're drunk, while they walk you towards a hook. and sometimes you might actually be able to fill up the bar and wiggle free. If you do, this will stun the killer and give you a decent head start to get away from them. Just don't count on actually wiggling free, since more times than not, they're going to have a hook nearby and you're going to end up on it. Once you've been hooked, once again, please don't panic. You'll see the auras of your teammates highlighted in yellow, so you'll be able to know where they are, and they'll see you highlighted in red on a hook, so they'll know that they should probably come and get you down off that rusty old hook. You'll also notice that under your status icon in the bottom left, you'll have a red bar that will start to drain. Once it reaches 50%, you will enter the struggle state, where you will have to tap the button prompt on screen in a frantic fight for your life. If you miss a prompt or if the bar fully drains, you will get sacrificed on the hook and be taken out of the match. You may notice that when you are first hooked, you have a prompt to escape from the hook yourself. This only has a 4% chance of actually happening, so it should be saved for emergencies only. Every time you attempt this and fail, a large chunk of your bar's progress will be lost, and you will be bringing yourself ever close to dying to the weird elder spider god thing in the sky. Now back to our example match. Let's say you've been hooked once, and a friend has come and pulled you down before you actually hit the struggle state. Well, the next time that you get hooked, you should be ready, since as soon as you hit that hook, your character will finish screaming in pain, since they've been impaled through the chest for the second time in a single day. And then you will immediately enter the struggle state and have to fight back against the entity by rhythmically pressing that button prompt on screen. Alright, so just for example's sake, let's say you've been hooked twice, or maybe just once and your friends took their sweet time getting to you, or you foolishly tried to escape for yourself and you've been put into the struggle state. This means that the next time that the killer throws you up on a dirty old hook, you're just dead for real. 3 strikes and you're out and all that. Once you die, you can either choose to spectate your teammates and see how they're doing without you, or if you're playing alone, you'll probably just want to check your after-game stats and then just move on to the next match. Back to our example game, let's say that you haven't been killed just yet, and you hear the sweet sound of that final generator popping. This is great. It means you're very, very close to escaping. You'll briefly see the exit gates highlighted before they will disappear, so you'll want to try and memorize at least the general direction of where you saw them. Once you find an exit gate, you'll want to flip the switch down to fully open it. You will have to hold down the button prompt for 20 seconds to do this, and it will start to make a fair amount of noise, so be careful since the killer is still lurking out there and they can see where the exit gates are located at all times, so they'll know where they should be looking for you. Once the exit gates are fully opened, it's just a matter of running, walking, or in some cases crawling out to safety. You'll also notice that everything will begin to shake and the ground will have these weird orangish lava vein things, and you'll see a progress bar start draining at the top of your screen. This is known as the endgame collapse, and it's basically just there to make sure that the match doesn't get drawn out by anyone sticking around longer than they need to, since they've already opened up the way to escape. You have a solid 2 minutes to leave before the timer runs out, so if you have a friend that is hooked and you don't want to leave them behind, you should maybe hurry up. You'll get an extra rumble and a bell will sound every 30 seconds during the endgame collapse to remind you that you are on a timer. If you're still on the map once the timer runs out, the entity will just kind of get bored with you and shoot up out of the ground and impale you and snap your neck. I'm not kidding you, it's like really brutal. It'll also stab your brain for some reason as well. I'd advise you just leave before the timer runs out. Let's quickly rewind and talk about another scenario that may happen. Let's say you've been doing fine all match, you've been working on your generators, you've been helping your teammates out where you can, but your teammates have been running into a little bit of trouble. You find yourself all alone, your buddies are all dead. You may think that all hope is lost, how could you possibly do everything by yourself? Do not worry. If you're the final survivor alive on a map, a hatch will spawn that you can jump into and instantly escape the match. The hatch icon will appear in the bottom left if it is opened at any time, so you'll know that it is an option to leave through if you see that icon. Be wary though, since if the killer finds the hatch before you, they can slam it shut and start the endgame collapse and force you to open the exit gates. This will put you on that 2-minute timer again, meaning that you need to find an exit gate, open it, and leave, all while dodging the killer, and you're all alone. The odds are definitely stacked against you, but don't give up hope, you can maybe pull it off. More than likely, you're going to be found and killed, but maybe, just maybe, you can pull it off. and get that 1 in a million escape that you can brag about to your friends for like at least a week before they get sick of hearing about it. Now let's switch over to the killer side of the game and go through what a match might look like if you're playing as a killer. Obviously, most of the same rules are going to apply, you're just going to be on the other side of things. So you'll spawn in, and the first thing that you'll notice is probably the auras of all of the generators around the map. This is a nice handy way of knowing where survivors are typically going to be hanging around, since doing generators is their main goal. Survivors typically won't spawn close to you unless the match is bugged or something, so pick a generator that seems kind of a decent ways off, and start making your way towards it. Make sure that while you're doing this, you're keeping your eyes out for scratch marks that are left behind by running survivors, or crows flying up in the air because survivors have startled them, and keep your ears perked up for the sounds of generators being worked on or the crows calling out. If a survivor fails a skill check or performs a rushed action at any time, you will get what is called a loud noise notification, which will appear as a small explosion bubble and will give you an explosion sound associated with it. This will give you a general idea of where survivors might be if they aren't hitting all their skill checks or are moving around just too quickly through windows or jumping in and out of lockers or vaulting over pallets. If you aren't directly facing where the loud noise notification is, you will get a small red arrow in the center of your screen telling you what direction that noise notification just happened. You'll want to keep all of this in mind during the match, since knowing the general area that survivors might be hanging around in will keep you in the action as much as you can, which is very important for killers. So back to our example match. Let's say you searched a few generators and found nothing, but then you come upon one with 3 survivors on it. They're most likely going to scatter like roaches, but if you manage to somehow sneak up on them, you may be able to grab them off of the generator, or you can just give them a good old slap across the face with whatever weapon your killer is using. This will injure them if they are healthy, as well as give them a boost of speed and making you slow down to clean your weapon because your equipment needs to be maintained for peak killing potential. Typically you're going to want to chase the first one that you've injured and ignore the others for now, and let them run off to wherever they want to go hide. Obviously if one of them is just standing around and kind of ignoring the fact that you're there, knock some sense into them. Injuring survivors will make them grunt out in pain, and as long as they're injured, they will also leave those pools of blood behind them. Use these pained noises and blood pools as additional ways to track down injured survivors on top of scratch marks, crows, and your noise notifications. Let's say you come across some survivors, but they escaped, you weren't able to hit them. That's fine, start chasing after one of them. Keep in mind that you do move faster than them, so eventually you will catch up to them and be able to hit them. You should also keep in mind that you emit a red stain in a small cone in front of you, so they will have some idea of where you are and what direction you're facing, even if you're hidden behind a very tall wall. You can hide this by walking backwards or facing the opposite direction, but it can be difficult if you're new to the game and don't quite know where things are, and you might just kind of bump into trees or boxes or something. If you hold down your attack button, you will lunge forward, giving you a bit of extra distance to hit survivors than if you just tapped the button for a basic attack. Let's say that you missed your swing, and they vault over a window to escape your wrath. With most windows in the game, there is a path nearby that you can walk around instead of following them through the window. Killers vault windows a fair amount slower than survivors, meaning that following them through the window is not always the best option, unless you can't see another way around, in which case you may be forced to vault the window after them. The other main thing that you'll see them using in chases is wooden pallets. They can throw these down at any time, and if the pallet falls on you, you'll get stunned and have to wait to recover before you can do anything else. Just because pallets can stun you doesn't mean you should be afraid of them, however. So be sure to swing and hit them, even if it means that you hit them and then they hit you back with a pallet. You injuring them is going to waste a lot more of their time than you're going to lose from being stunned briefly. Once they've dropped the pallet, you can kick it and break it, making it unusable for good, or you can go around it. Breaking pallets is typically the best course of action, since if you do leave them up, survivors will be able to slide over them repeatedly, and maybe even get away from you by doing so. If a chase lasts for long enough period of time, you may notice a yellow icon appear on the right side of your screen, and you'll start moving a little bit faster. This is what is known as Bloodlust, and it can stack up to 3 times. You will gain a stack of Bloodlust for every 15 seconds that you're in chase with a survivor and you haven't hit them yet. It's in the game to help killers with harder loops, so they can catch up to survivors without things being infinite loops that are just impossible to catch survivors on. You will lose your Bloodlust all of your stacks if you hit a survivor, are stunned by a pallet, break a pallet, or lose line of sight on a survivor for too long. Breaking pallets is probably still going to be your best bet most of the time, even if you do have a few stacks of Bloodlust. Now let's say in our example match, you've gone through a few loops with survivors, you've broken a few pallets, you catch them out in the open, they have nothing to defend themselves with, and you hit them again. This will down them and put them into the dying state, meaning they'll just be lying there bleeding on the ground. You can pick them up and throw them over your shoulder to carry them to a hook. If you aren't sure where the hooks are located, don't worry. Once you have a survivor on your shoulder, the auras of all of the hooks on the map will be highlighted in red for you. Find one that is close by, since the survivor will probably start wiggling to try and get off of you. You do have a fair amount of time before they are actually able to wiggle free, but don't waste too much time trying to take them to a faraway hook, and mind the swaying back and forth that you get when they are wiggling. Once you've thrown a survivor up on a hook, you will see that they get a progress bar under their status icon in the bottom left. Once this reaches 50%, or if you're hooking them for the second time in a match, they will enter the struggle state. If they fail to struggle or their bar runs out fully, or you hook them for the third time in a match, they will instantly be sacrificed and taken out of the match. Now you might be considering just hanging out near the hook and waiting for them to die so you can take them out of the match. However, this takes an extremely long amount of time, and during that time the other survivors are just going to be working on generators freely and escaping. Your best bet is to get back into the action as quickly as you can, using all of those tracking clues that I talked about earlier, instead of just camping near the hooked survivor. Maybe during the chase with the survivor that you just hooked, you noticed a loud noise notification off in another part of the map, or you saw some scratch marks or some crows fly up. Make your way over to where you think the survivors might be, and try and get another one downed and on a hook. This is the best way to apply pressure to the survivors, and make sure they aren't working on generators and escaping. Each survivor that you have hooked is either going to die on that hook, or have another survivor stop working on a generator to come and save them. Every survivor that you injure is one that you can either down the next time that you see them, or one that is wasting time getting healed. This is the main way that you can slow the game down in your favor, so you want to be injuring and hooking survivors as much as you can, and as quickly as you can. This is called applying pressure to the survivors, and is your main method of keeping them off of generators so you can stall out the game and give yourself enough time to get some kills. Another way to stall out generator progress is by kicking generators to damage them. This will cause the generator to start sparking and begin regressing any progress that the survivors may have put on the generator by working on it. Do keep in mind that this takes away time that you could be spending chasing and injuring survivors, so you should only do it as a last resort to regress generators. Survivors are able to work on generators much faster than they regress when you kick them. You can tell the approximate progress of how close a generator is to being finished by how many pistons are moving and how fast the pistons are moving. If only one of the pistons is moving and it's going slowly, that generator has barely been touched at all, and you probably shouldn't bother kicking it. If you see all 4 pistons moving quickly, that generator is about to pop, and is probably worth kicking to stop it from being finished. Now let's say that you've hooked a few survivors, maybe even killed 1 or 2 of them. Awesome. But in all the time it took you to get those kills, the other survivors have finished all of the generators. This means that now your objective is to protect the exit gates and keep the survivors from powering them up and then escaping. Obviously you can't protect both gates at once, but you'll want to try to keep survivors off of both of the gates as best as you can. You'll be able to hear if survivors are on an exit gate because they're fairly loud when they're being opened, and the 3 lights will light up as they get closer to being fully opened. If the game has been going extremely poorly for you, and you really just want the match to be over with, you can walk up and open the exit gate yourself, but this is really more of a concession option than it is a tactical one. Once a single exit gate is powered, you will see the world start to rumble, and notice that the ground will have orange lava-like streaks appear all over it, and a progress bar will start ticking down on the top of your screen. This means that the endgame collapse has been triggered. Once this bar reaches 0, which will happen after 2 minutes, if any survivors are still alive and in the game, they will be instantly killed by the entity. If you have someone hooked or in the dying state while this is happening, the timer will be slowed down, but it will still put pressure on the remaining survivors to either risk saving their friend, and maybe dying themselves, or just abandoning their friend and leaving with their own lives intact. If you're doing extremely well in the match, and you've managed to kill all of the survivors except for 1, no matter how many generators have been completed, even if it's none, a hatch will spawn somewhere on the map. You'll be able to hear it from a fair distance away. It has a distinctive wind howling sound, I guess. If you manage to find this before the survivor, you can walk up and kick it shut, which will instantly trigger the endgame collapse and power the exit gates, meaning you'll need to try to stop the lone survivor from opening an exit gate and escaping. If the survivor manages to find the hatch before you, they'll probably just jump in and escape immediately. And that's about it for this guide for beginners to Dead by Daylight. I hope this video has helped you to understand Dead by Daylight better, and I hope you enjoy your time with the game. If you want to learn more about killers and their unique powers and add-ons, as I said, I have a series called Entity Education in which I cover all of the killers and their unique stats. I also talk about what perks you may want to run on them, and give some tips on how to best play them, given their unique playstyles and powers. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave a comment on this video, or stop by my Twitch stream, or join my Entity Education Discord. I'm always happy to help anyone with any questions they may have about Dead by Daylight. My entire channel is pretty much dedicated to educating people about it, and there are plenty of helpful people as well in my Discord that would be happy to help you out with any questions you may have. Links for my Twitch stream, the Discord, and everything are up on the screen right now, as well as down in the description of the video. Thank you once again for watching this video. I hope it helped you, and I hope you enjoy your time playing Dead by Daylight. Best of luck in your matches. Goodbye.